Are you prepared to take the McKee administration to court?
Yes.
Whether it be via, I would say the second part is via the failure to timely respond to the APRA, or on a grander level?
We are exploring all legal avenues, although that is a last resort effort, because I would rather keep this collegial. I'm having this press conference today because I feel as if my collegiality has only been unilateral. I am doing this because I think emphasis needs to be placed on the fact that our state is being run by an administration that likes to do it in the dark. And they don't like the people of the state to know where their money's going and how it's being spent. And when a legitimate question is asked, and no one can argue that this is a legitimate question, and we don't get answers to that legitimate question from this administration, or worse yet, we get the runaround. As an elected official, we should never get the runaround from the administration or any other branch of government. But to be postponed, delayed, and then outright at the end just scoffed at by being given a pile of worthless documentation, it's an insult to the institution of the House of Representatives. It's an insult to the entire tax-paying public of the state of Rhode Island. Kathy, I'm ready for your question.
Okay, a couple. You mentioned Nerona twice. Have you reached out to him, and has he offered any kind of help resolving this? And have you filed a complaint?
I have not escalated it to that point because it would require exactly that, the filing of a complaint. We have gone out of our way in this quest for information to be accommodating, understanding that housing is working on multiple issues in multiple areas, that they're busy, that we understand that emails do require redaction. We have been as amicable in this as we possibly could, and generous with our flexibility. And that flexibility evidently was misconstrued as weakness, and this is what has resulted in us receiving inadequate response.
And that's my second question. What did you receive that you're calling vague and inadequate? Did you receive a breakdown of who got paid, how much, to do what?
No.
If you didn't get that, what did you get?
So I got the only direct invoicing through housing was to House of Hope, which is a nonprofit, as we said earlier, and to Rhode Island Energy. So Rhode Island Energy had to install a transformer to electrify that site, because I think it was either a vacant lot or a parking lot, probably didn't have the capacity to serve all those electrical needs. Other than that, I got a list of vendors, but no indication as to what aspect of the project they worked on and or what the costs were. I got no breakdown on any of the increases in costs, which, as you're aware, this was a $3.1 million project when it was awarded, and it's now sitting at $4.6 million. So there was nothing to really pursue after that, other than looking up the names of corporations.
To your point, Leader, do you, in your request and questioning the cost, do you think there was something nefarious, or are you just wondering why the costs are so much when a pallet shelter? I mean, they've said it was because they needed to put fire suppression.
Yeah, Brian.
Do you not believe their explanation?
It would be irresponsible for me to assert that there was something nefarious going on. The entire point is we don't know until we have the information. This is, Access to Public Records Act is something that in Rhode Island has been a cornerstone of transparency. It's been something that the media relies on. It's something that those of us in the legislature and all bodies rely upon. We also, as House members on the Committee of Finance, have further statutory availability to us to seek and receive these documents, in many cases even unredacted. So while I'm not insinuating anything was wrong, it's a mathematical question. Why is a unit that we probably paid $17,000 for, because that's what they cost if you look up these shelter pallets from the company Pallet. Why then did it cost over $100,000 per bed? That doesn't add up. When, as I point out, you could buy a brand new Winnebago for $25,000 that sleeps 5 people, has its own bathroom, its own kitchen, and is ready to go. You just plug it in, and that's that. That doesn't add up to me. It didn't add up to me when I posted on Twitter, and it didn't add up to the hundreds and thousands of people who then followed up on that tweet.
Have you spoken with House of Hope as to their side of this, what they're seeing the cost
We-
down to?
Alexandra, we have sent an APRA to House of Hope. Being a nonprofit organization, we aren't entirely sure what to expect. However, this project was funded by federal ARPA funds as well as Rhode Island funds. This is a 100% government-funded project. And regardless of who the subcontractor was, be they a nonprofit or an incorporated vendor, we as taxpayers have the right to know where our money was spent.
Does APRA need to be reformed? Because
I'm sorry, Steve?
does APRA need to be reformed? Because I'll tell you what, this week I received a decision from the Attorney General that was 2 years old. Goes back 2 years, and that was crazy, right? The issue was well over that.
Yeah, I think APRA certainly needs to be reviewed and reformed. We have, in this caucus, put legislation together and put it forward in the past, and I believe we have something either that has been submitted or is being worked on, as do other members of the legislature. There's a balance that we have to consider, which is the impact on smaller government entities like towns. A town hall with maybe 4 clerks, will they have the capacity to respond in a timely fashion versus the administration of the executive branch, who by all accounts should have this information at hand. They paid these bills. They should have access to the invoices. They should know why the cost overruns occurred. And that they weren't able to provide any information on that it calls into question how transparent they are willing to be.
Beyond this issue, Leader, do you see a broader problem with a lack of necessary transparency in government in Rhode Island?
Generally speaking, in government, I think there can always be more transparency in. Certainly in this administration, we have seen much more opacity than we have transparency. This goes back to the very first days of his administration, and I'm certain that you folks in the media can relate, because this has been a struggle for anyone to get any information of any value in a timely fashion from this administration.
Are you prepared to take the McKee administration to court?
Yes.
Whether it be via, I would say the second part is via the failure to timely respond to the APRA, or on a grander level?
We are exploring all legal avenues, although that is a last resort effort, because I would rather keep this collegial. I'm having this press conference today because I feel as if my collegiality has only been unilateral. I am doing this because I think emphasis needs to be placed on the fact that our state is being run by an administration that likes to do it in the dark. And they don't like the people of the state to know where their money's going and how it's being spent. And when a legitimate question is asked, and no one can argue that this is a legitimate question, and we don't get answers to that legitimate question from this administration, or worse yet, we get the runaround. As an elected official, we should never get the runaround from the administration or any other branch of government. But to be postponed, delayed, and then outright at the end just scoffed at by being given a pile of worthless documentation, it's an insult to the institution of the House of Representatives. It's an insult to the entire tax-paying public of the state of Rhode Island.
And I'm sorry.
Kathy?
Going back to, yes, APRA needs reform, you say, in what way? And I'm going to preface that with an observation. They tried to charge you the maximum that could be charged, the $15 an hour, that, for going into dusty basements to find 30-year-old records, to get spending records on something that just opened, and emails which are digital. So having prefaced that observation, because I think everyone in this room has lived this, what needs to be reformed in APRA that you think would address your situation specifically?
So I think that the largest issue with APRA is, and it's understandable, the largest challenge with APRA is that oftentimes, particularly in communications, there will be personally protected information, whether it's social security numbers, whether it's Paycom information or bank transfer information, that we want our attorneys to be able to go through and redact. That's just a normal process when you're releasing information. We don't want to stop that practice. We don't want to interfere with that practice because we believe it's important for the privacy of individuals who have nothing to do with the request to be kept private. However, when you're dealing with a very specific request, which this was, about a single project, and it's coming from a government agency or a branch of government, in this case the legislature, there should be no runaround as would be given to a member of the public making the same request. Now, again, this wasn't just a random fishing expedition. This was based on a very simple premise. We don't understand how this adds up. We don't understand how $100,000+ per bed had to be spent when these units only cost $17,000 per bed. That's a legitimate question. How can APRA be reformed to do that? We can put or solidify some of the changes that we used during COVID, where we allowed an extension of time under certain circumstances. That is appropriate, and that should be continued. However, you can't stonewall. And I did talk about a couple of events or things that occurred in the time we were waiting. And I don't know, people have asked me, do you think the confirmation of the secretary had something to do with it? Do you think McKee's re-election announcement had something to do with it? I don't know. I have no idea. That would be coincidental, but I do want to know what the answer to my question was. How much did it cost, who did it go to, and what did they do?
Just to clarify how this was left.
Yes.
It says that, I assume this is the last correspondence from the 13th to you, potentially? That you got
There
back,
have
that it
been
would take
some phone calls,
33
but
that it would take 33 hours to do what you want. So is it fair to say you're like, and you don't want to go back and forth with them about what this is going to take?
No, we have been going back and forth. In fact, outside of the scope of emails, my legal counsel has spoken with their legal counsel, because oftentimes under the confidentiality of our legal counsels, they can move things a little bit more easily when they have a private conversation. That's where our compromise came out, where I said, okay, look, I'll split it into 2 requests. Just give me the financial data. I really just want that. And then you guys go on ahead and take the time on the emails. The 33 hours have long passed. They've come and gone. This has been over a month, Brian, and they still haven't provided me with the emails. They are non-responsive at this point. We sought to get information on who to reach at House of Hope, because there's no publicly available information who we should address this to. So we addressed it to their general info email address. And we're doing this runaround like Keystone Cops, just simply trying to get a list of invoices and expenses, which should be in some form of a spreadsheet or other database that could be provided to us with the click of a button.
At this point, have they waived the $495? Have they acknowledged that because of who you are and you're ex officio on the House Finance, that you shouldn't have to pay that? Or are they still waiting for payment before they hand you any additional documents, number one? Number two, have you gotten any of the emails, which arguably are the easiest thing for them to produce, because it's a digital search? Have they produced any of that? And have they produced any kind of either, what's the word I'm looking for, invoices or, bills showing that amounts went out, let alone a summary?
So to answer your question, no, I have not received any of the emails, the second question. Okay. Regarding the, can you restate the first question again?
The first one was, have they waived the $495, or are they still waiting for payment?
Yeah, so I offered, at the time I was out of state, but I offered to have a check hand delivered to them, just so I could get the information. And in a phone call with my counsel, the housing department realized that the optics would be bad if I had to pay $495, which I was willing to write a personal check to do.
They said that to Dan?
They
The
said,
optics, was that the quote, Dan, optics?
Something along those lines.
Okay.
and that's when the compromise was reached, to give me the financials without the emails, yes.
The financials, without the emails and without having to pay, are they now waiting for a check for the emails?
I once again told them I am ready to write a check, and when we invoke the finance statute, which I am, again, statutorily entitled to this, I do not need to write a check,
Yeah.
nor wait. They have not responded back yet, and so we're proceeding. We're going with we're going at the House of Hope to see if they can provide us with this information. Frankly, it's an area that I don't know how successful we'll be with that, because they are a nonprofit. But again, this project was wholly funded at the request of the government of Rhode Island, and funded by the government of the state of Rhode Island and the United States of America.
Are you assuming, and then one question unanswered, did you get any invoices? Your answer is going to be not quite something else. I'll let you answer it, but it gets to a larger question, because it could be DOT, and they hire a big company, and the company subcontracts. Are you assuming that the state, because it is putting out the money, is supposed to get receipts to show that even the subcontractors actually had a job, and these are the hours they say they put in, and this is the amount that they were paid, and putting that over to housing, that House of Hope was supposed to provide those records to the state? Is that your assumption?
It's not an assumption. I will say this. We require of subcontractors, and you use DOT as an example, so I will as well. For example, when it pertains to our mandated quota for minority business enterprises, and that state contracts have to have now 15%, used to be 10%, we audit them right down to the subcontractor level to ensure that every phase of a project had that requisite 10 or 15%. So we already have granular data on the subcontractors, right down to the people who work for those subcontractors.
And you assume
I would expect that as a vendor, we would have the same level of access to the information of House of Hope. Absolutely. Otherwise, we would be giving taxpayer dollars to an entity hiding behind the cloud of their nonprofit status with no accountability to anyone. And that would be what's called a black hole. And I will start a nonprofit tomorrow and start bidding on state jobs, because if I don't have to account for the money I get, that's a pretty good gig.
Did you get any invoices?
No, the invoice I got was from Rhode Island Energy for the transformer. That was the only one.
Only one,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Can you remind us where the $100,000 figure came from?
Which $100,000?
You said that each bed.
Oh, over 100,000. So I just simply took the $4.6 million, which is where we are at that, and divided it by 45 beds, which we had, and it was 100 and something $1,000. I'm a rounder offer, so I just said over 100,000. But yeah, I mean, the math from your calculator would be much better than the math from my head.
And to follow that number, I was just looking at a number that was sent to my colleague Patrick, and it was like 3.6, 3.7. I'm not familiar with the 4.6. Where did that number come from?
So, well, it's been reported widely in the news, and my understanding is that the first contract was $3.1 million, and then there was another $1.3 million addendum onto that, and frankly, that 4.6 is straight out of news stories. I would have to consult Uncle Google to find the exact news stories, but they are out there.
Okay.
Were you waiting for a certain amount of time to hope for more progress on this before speaking out with us today?
I was hopeful that last Thursday I would have had all of the, strike that, the Thursday prior, I was hoping I would have the information. They dragged their feet continuously last week, emails like, I'm still working on it, I haven't forgotten about you, and the amount of work product that we got, Ian, frankly, could have been put together in about 5 minutes and sent over an email. It was anemic at best, and it was nothing but delays that had no real, really articulated justification for them. And based on what we got, there is no justification for the delays. It's been over a month.
As a state rep, why can't you just be sworn in or something and be given unredacted?
That's a good question, Steve, and I would even be willing to allow a third party, like a council or a magistrate, to be a part of that process where they could review and determine what can be released immediately. That would not insult me at all. Sure. I would swear an oath to not divulge any personally protected information. I would have no issue with that whatsoever. However, there's no mechanism for that right now in the standard APRA process. There are other means where that could be done through an oversight hearing, but that's a whole other system that would have to go through.
And I'm not, maybe I'm just not following the thought there, but I'm not sure why that's relevant to why they can't just give you amounts paid to individual contractors.
Nor am I, Kathy.
I don't know that you need to, they don't need to redact that,
No.
right?
No, I mean, so on some of the invoices, there may be things like bank transfer numbers and whatnot that have to be redacted, but it doesn't take 33 hours to do that. You just get a Sharpie and you go, and it's done.
When you look back in, I'll call it Rhode Island APRA history, one need only go back to the infamous situation with Patricia Morgan. And years ago, the documents, and I believe she ended up getting Civil War maps or things of that type. What's it going to take, in your opinion, it's not just a question of legislation, but for the executive branch of the Department of Administration of the state to respect the spirit underlying APRA? What has to happen?
You know, I didn't have any intention of really touching on this, but the temptation is too much to resist. We're living in a time now where there's this unique entity called DOGE in Washington, D.C., which is sending shivers through state governments across the country because a lot of things are being looked into. And in a time where a deep blue state like ours is potentially in the crosshairs of this presidential administration on conditional funds being withheld, you would think that this administration would not do anything that would further elevate their lack of concern for transparency. But evidently that sort of savvy is not present right now with this administration.
More so this administration than past administrations, including Rhode.
Based on my experience, I would say this administration has been the most difficult. Yeah, a different representative was referenced a little while ago, and that was an absolutely terrible situation. It was thousands and thousands of dollars being sought in that one. And I think after that played out, the responding agency had a couple of black eyes over that. So I just feel that this agency, from the hearings on ILO in, I don't remember the month, very early on in the McKee administration, when we learned of all of these things that happened in the background and we got no answers on. And then with the bridge, we've got pins disappearing, it was one truck, we don't get straight answers from the McKee administration or any of the state departments. And that's all we're asking for. We are a co-equal and separate branch of government in the legislature. Our job is to allocate money to be spent by the executive branch of the judiciary. And when we have questions about how that money that we allocated was spent and whether it was spent wisely, appropriately, etc., we damn well are owed an answer on that.
Leader, do you have time for just one off-topic question?
Sure.
I just wanted to ask if you could respond to comments that Senator Morgan made that were since deleted about Echo Village.
I'm not terribly familiar with that, and I don't want to conflate this issue with that. This is strictly about financial records and opacity in the McKee administration.
Is the Republican House minority prepared to take some sort of political action on the floor regarding passage of the budget if this information isn't forthcoming?
Look, I mean, I think that would be just political theater, and I don't think interfering with the business of the legislature in that degree, Pat, would be beneficial to the people we represent. Again, I've tried to be very clear that this is not a partisan issue. This is not a Republican versus Democrat thing. This is what I expected when I initially penned that APRA request, a simple endeavor to try to find out some answers to questions that people were asking. And that it's blown up to this level is further reflection on this administration's lack of willingness to play nice and basically to do what the people of the state expect them to do, which is spend their money responsibly and let them know where it's going.
You had mentioned earlier, in response to a question, would you consider legal action? You said absolutely. So is Dan about to file something this afternoon?
We're not filing anything this afternoon.
Yeah.
We are seeing what we have available to us as tools. We do not want to go that route.
So we're part of your strategy right now. See if they will respond to your press conference, our stories, and if that doesn't produce the material you're looking for, then potentially a
Isn't
lawsuit.
that what the media is for, Kathy?
Leader Chippendale.
Yes.
Without getting into a broader discussion, the question is, this obviously went awry. What suggestions are coming from the Republican House minority in terms of addressing the greater issue of homelessness in this session?
Well, I mean, you're asking a much larger question, which I'm happy to talk, and I could talk at length about, and I will speak to you as succinctly as I can. Rhode Island clearly needs affordable housing, and that's a lowercase a and a lowercase h. Okay, this isn't low and moderate income housing. We need housing that is affordable for the people of Rhode Island to get into. And we're struggling greatly right now. We have approximately 34% of in-migration from U.S. states into Rhode Island comes from Massachusetts, where in the Boston Beltway, people are making salaries that don't even come close to what you can earn in Rhode Island, and they're happy to tack on 20 minutes to their drive to move into the state of Rhode Island and buy houses that our children and residents would be able to buy if they were able to compete with people who made Boston salaries, but they're not. So we have great pressure on our housing market right now, which is pushing out, of course, the folks on the lowest end of the economic spectrum into homelessness. It's completely unacceptable. We have spent the past 3 years, and I have been on the housing committee for the past, since it was conceived in 2021 to address affordable housing in the state of Rhode Island, which includes homelessness, which we deal with regularly in that committee. And I have not been very optimistic that the changes in the law are going to result in the types of changes we need in the housing market. We're nibbling away at the edges while the foundational question and issue, which is Rhode Island is simply it's too expensive to do business. The cost of living is too high, and the cost of doing business in the state of Rhode Island is just too high. We can't get houses built because it's too expensive to build houses in the state of Rhode Island.
To come back to your reason for this news conference, have you had occasion to talk directly with the governor about this?
Governor McKee will not speak to me.
Why not?
You would have to ask him that question, why he
Did
doesn't.
you try to get him to talk
I have,
to you?
yes.
And he just walked right by while you were saying governor, governor?
He has never been that rude, but I don't see him that often in person.
What, so describe the occasion that led you to tell Ian that he won't talk to you.
Well, I have reached out to his staff. I've spoken to some of his staff in the hallway in the house and asked for meetings, and I've only been granted one meeting, and that was in 2021 or 2-ish. And it wasn't a very productive meeting, and it was a frustrating meeting. And from that point on, we have not had the best relationship.
Subject?
That was about a road project in my district that had been neglected for a couple of decades. It was a much easier issue to deal with, but unfortunately it didn't go well.
I think I'm gonna start wrapping this up. Any last question?
Yeah. The documents, I would love to see the list that they gave you that named the contractors but didn't give you how much they were paid and to do what.
Okay.
I would love to see the vague and unsatisfactory responses, just so I can see if you got what we got, or maybe you've already got more than we've got.
One never knows.
Be interesting to compare.
Let me turn the tables. When did you get what you got?
It wasn't me, it was my colleague Patrick, so feel free to give the call.
All right. It would be interesting to know when that happened, because if you received it earlier than I did, then that further bolsters my point that there was no need for hesitation on their part. We can compare notes, Kathy.
Let's compare notes before, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not leaving until I get those documents.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.